I still remember the exact feeling in my chest when I walked into that conference room. It wasn't the thundering heartbeat you get before a big presentation, and it wasn't the heavy, sinking dread that comes with bad news either. No, it was something colder, sharper, like the inside of me had been hollowed out, leaving only a thin shell behind. I had already sensed something was coming. A subtle shift in the way conversations stopped when I walked by. The cryptic looks exchanged between senior staff. The way Alex Vance, the CEO of Stanton Industries, had stopped copying me on important emails over the past few weeks. I wasn't naive. I knew the corporate world could turn on you in a blink, no matter how hard you worked or how much you bled for the company. Still, knowing something and feeling it are two very different things. Alex sat at the end of the long polished table, tapping a silver pen rhythmically against his coffee cup like it was just another ordinary Friday morning. His perfectly tailored navy suit and relaxed posture did not indicate the bomb he was about to drop. Around him, the HR director and the chief operating officer sat stiffly, their eyes carefully neutral. A legal pad sat untouched in front of the HR director, a single pen placed exactly parallel to its edge, a silent signal that this was already decided. He barely even looked at me as he spoke. "We're making some changes, Claire. Downsizing. Your position is being eliminated, effective today." His voice was so casual, so detached, you would have thought he was reading the weather report, announcing light rain showers expected by noon. For a second, I just stood there, staring at him. The words hung in the air, strangely weightless, as if they weren't big enough to match the enormity of what they meant. I didn't flinch, didn't give him the satisfaction. I locked away the roiling emotions behind a carefully constructed wall inside myself. "I understand," I said simply, my voice steady, cool. But inside, every part of me burned. 7 years. For 7 years of my life, I had poured into Stanton Industries. I had arrived when the company was on the verge of collapse, when entire departments were bleeding money and morale was at an all-time low. As Chief Development Officer, I had rebuilt crumbling divisions, secured partnerships Alex couldn't have dreamed of landing on his own, and navigated the company through a devastating market crash. None of it mattered. They had already chosen my replacement. I didn't hear it from Alex, of course. No, that kind of insult came packaged in the form of an accidental email blasted to the executive team while I was still gathering my things. Harper Quinn, 25 years old. A business degree from a mid-tier college, a handful of internships, and, most importantly, Alex's new girlfriend. The bitterness burned under my ribs, a sharp, acidic ache that no amount of deep breathing could ease. But I swallowed it down. I would not fall apart here. I would not give them a show. With slow, deliberate steps, I walked back to my office. The hallways seemed to stretch endlessly before me, lined with faces I barely registered. Some sympathetic, some awkward, most just relieved it wasn't them packing up today. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said a word. Inside my office, I methodically began to pack. My favorite pen, the one I used to sign my first major partnership deal. The small framed photo of my brother and me at our childhood home, grinning like fools in the summer sun. The worn boss lady mug, a gag gift that had become my daily companion. Each object seemed heavier now, each one a small goodbye I hadn't been ready for. I paused when I saw the congratulatory email sitting in my inbox, welcoming Harper Quinn as the new Chief Development Officer. They didn't even have the decency to wait until I left the building. The headline screamed, welcoming fresh energy and visionary leadership, as if my years of dedication were just a tired shadow they were eager to erase. I clicked it open, morbid curiosity winning out over pride. Sentences filled with empty buzzwords and exaggerated praise danced mockingly across the screen. It was brutal. It was humiliating. I closed my laptop for the final time with a soft click. A knock at the door interrupted the heavy silence. I looked up to find Ethan Reyes, the head of finance, standing there. One of the few people in that building who had ever treated me with genuine respect. He didn't come in, just leaned against the doorframe, his face tight with anger he was trying to suppress. "This company won't last without you," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. I gave him a small smile. It wasn't happiness, exactly. More like gratitude mixed with a strange, weary kind of relief. Thanks, Ethan, I said. Take care of yourself. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but then just shook his head and walked away. Maybe it was better that way. I didn't need more apologies. I didn't need promises they couldn't keep. What I needed was to walk out of that building with my dignity intact. I picked up the small cardboard box, holding it tightly against my chest like a shield, and made my way to the elevators. I refused to look back at the stairs that followed me, refused to let them see even a crack in my armor. As the elevator door slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of the Stanton Industries logo gleaming proudly on the marble wall. For a second, something twisted deep inside me. Not sadness, not yet. Just a cold, clear promise. I didn't need to say it out loud. Alex Vance would regret the day he decided I was expendable. The doors closed. The cold January air hit my face the second I stepped outside, but I barely noticed it. My mind was too full, replaying the morning's events over and over like a cruel loop I couldn't escape. I walked without direction, my heels clicking sharply against the pavement, the cardboard box feeling heavier with every step. I must have looked strange, a woman in a navy dress suit, carrying a box of her life's work through the crowded streets like some modern-day cautionary tale. But I didn't care. I barely saw the people rushing past me. At some point, my aimless wandering brought me to a familiar storefront. A small bookstore cafe, tucked between a dry cleaner and a stationery shop. My little sanctuary, the place I had escaped to on countless late nights when the pressure became too much. The bell chimed softly as I pushed open the door, the warm scent of coffee and old books wrapping around me like a balm. I found an empty leather armchair in the corner and collapsed into it, setting my box carefully on the floor beside me. For the first time all day, the tightness in my chest loosened just a little. An older man sat nearby, engrossed in a thick paperback. He glanced up at me over his glasses, offering a kind, knowing smile. "Rough day?" he asked gently. I gave a small, breathy laugh. "You could say that." He nodded, as if he already knew the whole story. "Sometimes people forget that our worth isn't something they get to decide," he said, setting down his book. "It's already ours. It's just easy to forget when they treat us like we're replaceable." His words landed somewhere deep inside me, cracking through the numbness. "Thanks," I said quietly, the word feeling heavier than it should have. He simply smiled again and returned to his book, giving me the gift of silence and space to start piecing myself back together. I leaned back in the chair, letting the sounds of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the soft rustle of turning pages, wash over me. For the first time since that cold conference room, I allowed myself to breathe. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket as I sat curled up in that corner booth at the bookstore cafe. I pulled it out without much hope, expecting maybe another automated HR message or some junk spam. But when I glanced at the screen, a different kind of weight pressed against my chest. It was a message from Ethan Reyes. "Whatever you build next, Claire, I'm in." For a long moment, I just stared at those words. 3 sentences, barely a dozen words, yet they cracked through the exhaustion and humiliation like sunlight through storm clouds. The hollow, cold feeling inside me shifted, morphing into something sharper, something stronger. I wasn't alone. And more importantly, I wasn't finished. By the time I finally made my way back to my apartment, the sky had darkened to a deep velvet, the city lights blinking awake against it. I dropped my bag just inside the door, kicked off my heels, and collapsed onto the couch, every muscle in my body screaming for rest. For a few minutes, I let myself just sit there, sinking into the silence, trying to catch my breath after the emotional freefall of the day. I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, letting the noise of social media drown out my thoughts, when a new text flashed across the screen. It was from an unknown number. "You're not the only one leaving." My heart skipped. Adrenaline surged back to life as I sat up straighter, nearly fumbling my laptop onto my lap in my rush. My fingers flew across the keyboard, logging into my work email, out of pure instinct more than logic. There it was. Dozens of resignation emails. Name after name, familiar faces, key players, the backbone of Stanton Industries, all stepping down. Directors, senior managers, even some executives I had worked late nights with, fought side by side with during merger deals and board battles. They were leaving. Some had only sent short, polite notices. Others had poured their anger into long emails about broken trust, mismanagement, and the loss of what Stanton used to stand for. But the message was clear. It wasn't just me. They weren't staying for Alex Vance. They had stayed for the vision we believed in, a vision that Alex had gutted the second he decided greed mattered more than loyalty. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the screen as a slow, fierce smile crept onto my face. Maybe Stanton Industries thought I was replaceable. Maybe Alex thought he could throw me away and move on like it meant nothing. But they had forgotten something critical. Loyalty isn't bought. It's earned. And once lost, it rarely returns. Before I could fully absorb the shift happening right before my eyes, my phone buzzed again, vibrating so insistently it startled me. An unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it after the day I had, but something in my gut told me to answer. I swiped to accept. Claire Hayes, a smooth, confident voice said. Speaking. I replied cautiously. This is Richard Langley, CEO of Meridian Enterprises. We've been watching the situation at Stanton closely. For a moment, I was speechless. Meridian wasn't just another corporation. They were Stanton's biggest rival. Older, richer, smarter, and far more aggressive when it came to seizing opportunities. I'd like to offer you a chance to build something better, Richard continued without hesitation. We're launching a new strategic development division, and we want you to lead it. No flowery language. No unnecessary details. He knew exactly who he was talking to, and he knew what I was capable of. I didn't need time to think. I didn't even blink. I'm in, I said, my voice steady and sure. When the call ended, I remained seated for a moment, staring out the window at the sprawling city lights. The anger, the betrayal, the sadness, all of it burned away, replaced by a clean, focused flame inside me. The war Alex had started wasn't over. It had only just begun. The energy in the room was electric. I looked around at the faces gathered around the long conference table in Meridian's sleek, modern office tower. Some were familiar colleagues who had left Stanton in the fallout. Others were fresh faces, ambitious and eager. But one thing tied us all together. We weren't here to settle old scores. We were here to build something new. Welcome to the beginning, I said, my voice steady but carrying more weight than I realized until I heard how quiet the room became. We're not here to destroy Stanton directly. That's not the mission. We're here to build something so strong, so undeniable, that Stanton crumbles under its own mistakes. There were nods around the room. A few determined smiles. Everyone here had seen firsthand how arrogance and greed could rot even the strongest foundation. I clicked the remote in my hand, pulling up a clean, simple presentation on the screen behind me. Strategic acquisition of trust. Our plan isn't about public attacks. No lawsuits. No messy battles. We let them rot from within. I continued. We focus on the relationships they undervalued. The clients who trusted people, not brands. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. They all knew who I meant. The clients Alex had treated like checkbooks instead of human beings. The next few weeks blurred into one relentless, exhilarating sprint. Late nights, endless meetings, and strategy calls that lasted past midnight. I reached out to every major partner I had built trust with over the years. Old contracts, new ventures, fragile deals we had saved during the recession. I didn't badmouth Stanton. I didn't need to. I simply reminded them who had been in the trenches with them when times were hard, who had fought for better terms, who had listened. And then, quietly, confidently, I offered them something better. Better service. Better leadership. A better future with Meridian Enterprises. One by one they shifted. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was unstoppable. The true turning point came when David Hawthorne agreed to meet. David wasn't just a client. He was Stanton's biggest private investor, a man whose decisions could shake markets or sink companies. We met at a quiet, elegant restaurant. No fanfare, no flashing cameras. Just two people sitting across from each other over black coffee and rare steak. He didn't waste time. "You built Stanton's success, not Alex," David said bluntly, interrupting my careful pitch halfway through. I blinked, caught off guard. "You're offering something he never understood: stability. Leadership. Vision not driven by ego," David continued, tapping a finger lightly against the table. "I'm moving my investments to Meridian." I barely kept my hands from trembling as we shook on it. When I walked out of that restaurant into the cold night air, my heart pounded so fiercely it drowned out the city noise around me. That single move was all it took. David's withdrawal triggered a chain reaction. Investors got spooked. News outlets caught the scent of blood in the water. Stanton stock, already shaky, began to plummet. Clients started asking hard questions. The cracks Alex had ignored were turning into chasms. And all I had to do was watch. A few weeks later, as I was reviewing partnership proposals in my bright, sun-drenched office, an office that already felt more like home than all my years at Stanton, my phone buzzed again. It was Ethan. I answered immediately. "Claire," he said, skipping formalities. "You need to know something. Alex is panicking. He's calling emergency board meetings. He's firing people left and right, threatening the few who stayed loyal." He hesitated. "And he's planning something desperate." I leaned back in my chair, a sharp, anticipatory chill running through me. "Let him," I said quietly. "He's already lost." I closed my laptop slowly, my mind racing with possibilities that I didn't like. "Desperate how?" I asked, already knowing whatever Ethan was about to say wouldn't be good. There was a pause, a small crackle on the line, as if even he struggled to put it into words. "I don't know yet," Ethan admitted. "But when Alex gets cornered, he doesn't fight fair. You know that better than anyone." I leaned back in my chair, the city lights beyond the window blurring into streaks of gold and silver. I thanked Ethan quietly and hung up, the phone feeling heavier in my hand than it should have. This wasn't over. Not even close. Whatever Alex Vance was planning, I would be ready. The headlines hit like a punch to the gut the next morning, even though some part of me had been bracing for it. Every major business outlet carried some version of the same story, each headline more sensational than the last. Former Stanton executive accused of corporate espionage. Claire Hayes at center of shocking corporate scandal. Meridian Enterprises implicated in alleged trade secret theft. I sat frozen for a moment, staring at the swirling mass of lies being broadcast to the world. Then slowly, methodically, I began to scroll through the articles. Each piece dripped with half-truths and blatant fabrications, all clearly spoon-fed by Stanton's PR machine. They painted me as a traitor, a woman who had spent years plotting to steal confidential information and hand it over to their biggest rival. It was almost impressive in a way. How fast Alex had moved. How deeply he had prepared for this. He must have been truly desperate. But desperation makes people sloppy. And Alex had underestimated me again. I spent the next few hours gathering every piece of documentation I had, working with a calmness that felt almost clinical. Copies of my resignation letter, time-stamped, signed, and witnessed. Clearance emails from Stanton's legal department confirming my clean exit. Screenshots of the IT logs showing that all my access had been revoked before I ever stepped foot inside Meridian's offices. Project plans and division blueprints from Meridian, dated months before any conversations with me had ever started. It was all there. Neatly filed, indisputable. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just ready. The next morning, I found myself standing at the front of a sleek conference room in Meridian's headquarters, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and lights so bright they seemed to strip the skin from your nerves. Cameras pointed at me from every angle. Journalists packed into rows, their pens poised, their expressions skeptical and hungry. They smelled blood. Good. I wanted them to look. I wanted them to see. I placed the first document under the projector lens, adjusted the focus, and looked out over the sea of expectant faces. "My name is Claire Hayes," I began, my voice even, almost conversational. "And I am here to set the record straight. No theatrics. No emotion. Just facts." I walked them through the timeline step by step. My signed, dated resignation letter submitted to Stanton's HR department 2 full weeks before my final day. Official emails from Stanton's legal counsel confirming my exit was complete and uncontested. Documentation showing Meridian's strategic development plans had been drafted independently, long before I was ever in discussions with them. Piece by piece, I laid out the evidence. Brick by brick, I dismantled the wall Alex had tried to trap me behind. I didn't attack Stanton directly. I didn't have to. By the time I finished, the mood in the room had shifted. The pens weren't scratching furiously anymore. The journalists leaned forward now, exchanging glances, whispering questions to one another. It wasn't outrage at me I saw on their faces anymore. It was doubt, suspicion, but not toward me, toward Alex Vance, toward Stanton Industries. Within hours, the media narrative flipped on its head. Instead of Claire Hayes, the traitor, the new headlines read, "What is happening at Stanton Industries? CEO Alex Vance under fire amid scandal and investor exodus." Investors started panicking almost immediately. Clients withdrew meetings. Shareholders demanded answers. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. "They're done protecting him," he said, barely able to keep the excitement out of his voice. "The board's calling an emergency meeting. Without him." I closed my eyes, just for a second, letting the words sink in. It was happening, faster than even I had dared to hope. That evening, curled up on my couch with a blanket and a cup of tea cradled between my hands, I watched the news unfold. The anchor's voice was smooth, detached, as she reported. Breaking: Alex Vance removed as CEO of Stanton Industries amid scandal and investor backlash. No grand speeches. No stage departures. Just a single, simple sentence. It was over. Justice didn't always arrive with sirens and fireworks. Sometimes it arrived quietly, sliding into place like the final piece of a puzzle. But when it did, it was sweeter than anything I could have imagined. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I simply sat there, a small smile playing at the corners of my lips, feeling a peace settle over me that I hadn't felt in years. Alex Vance had tried to destroy me. Instead, he had destroyed himself. The phone buzzed again on the table next to me. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to answer. I didn't recognize the number. But somehow, deep down, I knew exactly who it was. Slowly, I picked it up and pressed it to my ear. There was a long, heavy silence before the voice finally spoke. "You won," Alex said. His voice was low, defeated, stripped of the arrogant bravado he had once worn like armor. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything toward him anymore. "I don't think about it that way," I said softly. "I feel free." Another long silence. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, as if he was searching for something to say, an excuse, an apology, anything to soften what had happened. But there was nothing left to say. Not for him. Not for me. Without another word, I ended the call and set the phone gently back down on the table. Outside, the city lights blinked steadily in the darkness, 1,000 tiny reminders that life kept moving forward, no matter how hard the past tried to cling to you. The next morning, the sun rose clear and sharp against the steel towers of the skyline. I shrugged into my coat, slid my hands into my pockets, and stepped outside. The city buzzed around me, coffee carts steaming, taxis honking, businessmen and women hurrying to meetings with their heads bowed against the lingering chill. It should have felt overwhelming. It should have felt like too much. But today, it didn't. Today, it felt alive. It felt like possibility. It felt like freedom. And for the first time in a long, long while, I smiled not because I had survived the storm, but because I was walking forward into something entirely my own. I wandered without a destination, just letting my steps carry me wherever they wanted. Past the gleaming glass towers of downtown, past the old bookstore cafe where I had found a small island of peace when everything first fell apart. Each familiar street corner, each storefront window, each crack in the sidewalk seemed to whisper pieces of my story back to me. The long nights, the battles fought and lost and won, the heavy moments when I wondered if it was all worth it. And yet, somehow, with each step, I felt lighter. As if with every block I passed, another invisible weight slipped off my shoulders. Passing a high-end clothing store, I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in the tall window. I paused. For a moment, I just stood there, staring. My hair was loose around my shoulders, falling in soft waves. There was a flush to my cheeks from the cold, and a steadiness in my eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe not ever. For years, I had walked these same streets carrying invisible burdens. The constant pressure to prove myself. The fear of disappointing people who had never truly cared for me, who only measured my worth in numbers, in contracts, in success they could claim. The endless belief that loyalty would protect me, that sacrifice would be rewarded. I had fought battles because I thought I had to. I had stayed loyal to places and people who had used that loyalty for their own ends. And for what? A title? An office with a view? The empty approval of people like Alex Vance? I stared at the woman in the glass, and for the first time, I recognized her. She wasn't weighed down anymore. She wasn't fighting for scraps of validation. She wasn't chained to anyone's expectations but her own. She was free. And she was enough. Further down the block, I found myself outside a small cafe I had passed 100 times, but never stepped into. It wasn't fancy, just a cozy little space with worn wooden tables, chalkboard menus, and a soft hum of conversation that barely rose above the clink of coffee cups. It felt right. I slipped inside, letting the warm air embrace me. The girl behind the counter gave me a bright, genuine smile. I ordered a latte, something rich and comforting, and found a small table by the window where I could watch the world move by without feeling like I had to keep up with it. I cradled the cup in my hands, letting the heat seep into my fingers, thawing out parts of me that had been frozen for too long. Outside, the city buzzed, taxis weaving through traffic, people rushing along the sidewalks, bundled up against the cold, lives unfolding in 1,000 different directions. And for once, I didn't feel like I was racing against them. I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't running from anything, either. I was simply here, present, at peace. It was a strange, beautiful feeling, one I wasn't sure I had ever truly allowed myself before. I didn't need revenge to feel victorious. Alex's downfall wasn't the prize. The board meetings, the headlines, the whispered gossip in corporate circles, none of it mattered now. The real victory was this. The quiet freedom filling my chest. The simple, profound knowledge that my life belonged to me. Not to Stanton Industries. Not to Alex. Not to anyone else's ambition or greed. Just me. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting each taste anchor me more firmly in the present. There would be new battles ahead, of course. Life was never without its challenges. But now, they would be battles I chose. For dreams I believed in. On terms I set. The woman I had become knew her worth wasn't tied to titles or salaries or corner offices. It was woven into every choice I made, every quiet moment I honored myself instead of someone else's agenda. I realized, sitting there in the golden morning light, that power was never about control or conquest. It wasn't about winning wars or crushing enemies. True power was quieter, stronger. Simpler. True power was walking away stronger, wiser, free. And that's exactly what I had done. The world outside the window kept moving, busy and chaotic and indifferent, but I watched it now with new eyes. Not as someone desperate to catch up. Not as someone left behind. But as someone who had already arrived exactly where she needed to be. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip on the table, and stepped back out into the crisp, sunlit morning. The city was still racing, the wind still biting, the noise still rising, but inside me, there was only quiet, only peace, only possibility. And as I turned my face toward the day, a small, steady smile pulled at my lips. The best chapters of my story were still unwritten. And this time, I would be the one holding the pen.